Hello again, football fans, and welcome to part 2 of our look at Elway versus Marino. John Elway and Dan Marino, two of the all-time greats, both selected in the 1983 NFL Draft. If you haven't seen part 1 of the video yet, please check it out. I cover their first 10 seasons in the NFL. But for a quick catch-up, let's get to it. Well, it's been 10 seasons. Both men have accomplished a great deal. Let's look at Dan Marino. He is smashing single-season passing records. He is just a phenomenon out there, winning almost every individual award there is for a quarterback to win. Also, he's competing with a lackluster running game all these years, which Don Shula and the Miami staff just didn't seem to want to fix all that much or make much of a wholehearted effort. Marino had a great offensive line, talented receivers. They had great teams in Miami. The problem is that running game, which you needed in the NFL in this era to be a contender, well, it wasn't quite there. Be that as it may, however, Marino has accomplished a great deal, has played in a Super Bowl, but has yet to win one. Let's look at John Elway. John Elway has had a terrible offensive line throughout his career, has only had one Pro Bowl offensive lineman backing him up, while Marino has had several. Not to mention the fact that Elway has also had a good running game, unlike Marino, behind him, with the likes of Sammy Winder and Gaston Green over the years. Also, you have to factor in too that Elway doesn't have the same strength of receivers. But what's Elway's specialty if he can't compete with Marino statistically? It's winning games. Elway just had a flair for the dramatic. While both quarterbacks made many comeback wins throughout their careers, which we'll get to at the end of this video, Elway just seemed to have that epic way of doing it. Whereas Marino was still always impressive, don't get us wrong. But Elway's helped make him into the legend that he is, whereas Marino's just phenomenal playing is what's making him into the legend that he is. Well, here we go. Now into their respective 11th seasons. Both men are in their early 30s, and Elway, like Marino, has yet to win a Super Bowl. He has played in 3. He actually has a dubious NFL record at this point going into the 1993 season, tied with Jim Kelly, who's also still active at this point for the Buffalo Bills, and the great Fran Tarkenton for most Super Bowl losses with 3. Well, here we go. 1993. And after 12 seasons, a big change has been made in Denver, as the Dan Reeves era had come to an end. There's a new head coach, Wade Phillips, who spent the past 4 seasons with the Broncos as their defensive coordinator. This is Phillips' first full-time head coaching job. He'd had interim head coaching jobs in the past with the New Orleans Saints, but he's had many coaching jobs throughout the NFL for more than a decade at this point. He was ready for this role, or so it seemed. Dan Marino and the Dolphins were heavy odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl this year. While the Broncos are coming off a very disappointing season where Elway got hurt, despite getting off to a 7-3 start, they missed the playoffs. Whereas the Dolphins finished first in the AFC East and made it all the way to the AFC Championship, only to be dethroned once again by Jim Kelly and the Buffalo Bills. This year, Marino hopes to solve Kelly. For both men, the season started right, as Marino led the Dolphins to a win over the Colts, and hey, he looked great as usual. Elway looked fantastic against the Jets in their season opener as well. Elway continues to look fantastic against the Chargers, while Marino and company just couldn't best the Jets. The next week, the Dolphins had a bye, but for Elway, this was a huge game, as he's going head-to-head with Joe Montana, who after 14 seasons with the 49ers was now the starting pivot for the division rival of the Broncos, the Kansas City Chiefs. This would be the first time he and Elway had faced each other since that disastrous outing from Elway and the Broncos in Super Bowl 24, where Montana just decimated the opposition. However, the only regular season meeting between the two, Elway had actually won back in 1985. It was an amazing duel, yet the points weren't being racked up by any of the star QBs in this game. As a matter of fact, all of Kansas City's points were from field goals in a 15-7 win. It was a good showcase from two of the best, but Elway came up short. Elway continued to rack up big numbers against the Colts, but then lost back-to-back games against the Packers, where he faced a youngster by the name of Brett Favre, and a late-game heartbreaker to the Raiders to fall to 3-3. As for the Dolphins, they looked great. After their loss to the Jets, they roared back with 2 wins, one over Jim Kelly and the Bills, and another over the Washington Redskins. They looked for 3 in a row against the Cleveland Browns. In the second quarter of the game, however, Dan Marino, without being touched, crumpled to the turf in a heap and couldn't stand in his own power. It would later be revealed he tore his Achilles tendon. His season was over. Heartbreak for him and the Dolphins in a year that looked great on paper. Backup Scott Mitchell was able to play well and get the win for the Dolphins in that game and extend their win streak to 3. But at 4-1 without Marino, that's something they haven't dealt with much in his career. Marino didn't really miss that many games at this point. He had a tough task ahead. But now back to the Broncos. In back-to-back wins over the Seahawks and Browns, Elway had nearly 500 yards passing in those two games. Despite a late-game loss to the Vikings, he still looked great. And then a dominant win over the Steelers and another win over the Seahawks with Denver at 7-4. He did, however, struggle in a loss to San Diego and found himself again squaring up with Joe Montana and the Chiefs. This time, however, it would be Elway to come out on top in a 27-21 victory. The Denver defense helped them to a 13-3 victory, and the Broncos found themselves at 9-5 in their next game. And now with just 2 games to go, they still had a chance to win the division. However, a poor effort against Tampa and a heartbreaking loss to the Raiders, the Broncos had fallen to 9-7. But they were still able to slip into playoffs in a wild card spot. With the great year Elway was having, many felt the Broncos could make a big run for it in the playoffs and the wild card round. They would square off against their division rivals, the Los Angeles Raiders. The game was back and forth, and even tied 21-21 at halftime. But the Raiders ran away with it, and just like that, the Broncos season was over. A 42-24 loss. Elway gave his all, and at this point the season was apparently even battling injury, which he kept secret. The Dolphins, on the other hand, they finished with a winning record as well, without Marino, but they didn't make the playoffs. Dan Marino's promising year was cut short, and while backup QB Scott Mitchell did respectably well, he too got hurt. And Steve DeBerg, yes, that's right, Elway's former teammate, who was nearing 40 years old, was called upon and just couldn't get the job done. The Dolphins missed the playoffs. Elway, however, had a career year statistically. For the first time in his entire career, he led the league in passing yardage and completions, a career-high completion percentage, and was third in the league. He was second in touchdown passes on the year with a career-high 25, a career-high passer rating, a second-team All-Pro, his first since 1987, his 5th Pro Bowl selection, and finished 4th in MVP and Offensive Player of the Year voting, and returned Denver to the playoffs. Well, folks, it's pretty much by default, but the year goes to John Elway. But his banner year can't be overlooked. Now at 33 years old, he was just getting into his best years. In 1994, the NFL was getting ready to celebrate their 75th anniversary and name their all-time team. And our two heroes, well, they hit Hollywood. Yes, John Elway guest starred as himself on an episode of the hit TV sitcom Home Improvement, while Dan Marino played himself as part of a mystery caper in the smash hit movie comedy Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which launched the career of Jim Carrey. But Marino's starring role this year is hoping to be the man who can, well, make the comeback. An Achilles tear is a career changer, and at times a career ender. But he was back with the Dolphins for another season. Elway was poised to have another repeat performance of his amazing year last year. Marino was ready for week 1, and after receiving a huge ovation from the hometown crowd, the real test would be when he takes the snaps. And well, how does 473 yards passing and 5 touchdowns sound? Yes, looking like Dan is still dangerous as he and Drew Bledsoe of the Patriots put on a quarterbacking clinic as the Dolphins got off to a huge start. As a matter of fact, the start was a 3-game winning streak, also being the Packers and Jets. Marino completed nearly 64.3% of his passes, threw 9 touchdowns, over 900 yards passing in just the first 3 games alone. And youngsters such as Favre and Bledsoe were being schooled by the man. Elway looked great in week 1, but the Broncos still lost. And, well, they lost the late game heartbreaker to the Chargers in that regard, as their lack of a running game was starting to kill them now. But Elway's 36 completions were a franchise record. And this also set the Broncos on a path of a 4-game losing streak. The Broncos got to their worst start since Elway joined the team. And the man himself, he still threw over 1,000 yards. And not to mention completed nearly 62.9% of his passes. He wasn't the problem. The same week the Broncos lost their 4th in a row, the Dolphins' winning ways ended with the loss to the Vikings. Those two teams, the Dolphins now at 3-1 and the Broncos at 0-4, were on opposite ends of the spectrum. The Broncos had a much-needed bye week as the Dolphins were back on winning track against the lowly Bengals. The following week, the Broncos finally broke free and downed the Seahawks, getting their first win of the year. Also, Marino squared off with Jim Kelly, and the Bills came up on the winning end once again. The next week, however, Marino looked great in a win against the Raiders, while the Broncos were back to their losing ways, as Elway and Joe Montana squared off in a marquee match of a Monday Night Football, but this time it was Big Joe coming out on the winning end. They had now won 2 games apiece against each other. Elway was again sacked 6 times. The offensive line still a problem in Denver. And this has been going on for most of his career now. The Dolphins had their bye week, and the Broncos actually won back-to-back games over the Chargers and Browns. Well, the Dolphins returned to action beating the Colts, and then the Patriots the following week. After a loss to the Rams, the Broncos fell to 3-6, and their playoff hopes were already looking dashed. But they finally turned it up. A big 4-game winning streak, defeating the Seahawks, Falcons, Bengals, and Chiefs. But in the win against the Chiefs, which by the way Joe Montana did not play, in that game Elway was hurt, which was a sad omen, as with 4 wins in a row, the Broncos were now in playoff contention. Marino's comeback year continued as the Dolphins were 7-2, but they would drop 2 straight to the Bears and the Steelers. And Marino played a beauty against the Jets, however, but then dropped a loss to rival Jim Kelly and the Bills. They beat the Chiefs and lost to the Colts, and finished the season with a win over the Detroit Lions and clinched first place in the AFC East in the process. Without Elway, the Broncos were lost. He saw some action in a loss against San Francisco, but in the end, their season was done. They finished 7-9 and were out of the playoffs. Marino's comeback was a huge story going into the playoffs and rallied him a ton of support, and awaiting the Dolphins, however, were the Kansas City Chiefs and Joe Montana, who hadn't faced Marino since Super Bowl 19. So here it was, 2 icons, Hall of Famers now at this point in their careers, face to face. It was a back and forth battle, and the game was tied 17-17 at the half. But in the third quarter, the Dolphins took the lead and never looked back. They would win the game 27-17, and Marino bested Montana at last. It would be Joe Montana's very last NFL game, as he would retire shortly after, and in the eyes of the Dolphins fans, it was sweet redemption for them and Marino. Now awaiting them was a highly talented young San Diego Chargers team that had been rebuilding and was now a tried-and-true Super Bowl contender. Hey, what, I'm serious. But Marino and company looked incredible, taking a 21-6 lead at the half. But in the third quarter, the San Diego Chargers defense went to work, and the Dolphins had no answer. But they still had a 21-15 lead with 25 seconds to play, when shockingly Stan Humphries completed a 61-yard drive, throwing an 8-yard touchdown to Mark Sahi, and the Chargers led 22-21. Marino had to go to work. After a bad kickoff by the Chargers, it gave Miami a chance to win it, especially after a pass interference call that put the Dolphins at the San Diego 30. But Marino threw 2 incompletions, and it was up to Pete Stoyanovich to kick the game winner 48 yards away, and a term familiar to Bills fans, wide right. Marino's comeback season comes to a heartbreaking end as the Chargers win, and they would later go on to appear in the Super Bowl. Were the laces out there, Dan? Anyway. Well, Marino played a decent game in the first half, had 115 yards, only threw 4 incompletions, but was 10 for 20 in the second half and just threw for 111. Despite the season-ending heartbreak, Marino still came back from an injury that could have changed everything for him in a negative way, but his resilience and will to play motivated him to return to perfect form, second in both passing yardage and completions, 5th in completion percentage, 3rd in touchdown passes, led the Dolphins to their 4th division title in his career, and he was sent to the Pro Bowl for the 8th time, and best of all, he was named NFL Comeback Player of the Year, and he had a role in Ace Ventura. Alrighty then. As for Elway, his numbers were still excellent, despite the year the Broncos had. There were a lot of problems on the team at the time, and he certainly wasn't one of them. He was still in the top 10 in all major categories, including being 4th in passer rating. He garnered his 6th Pro Bowl selection a boot, but indeed his late season injury, and the fact that only Shannon Sharp was his main go-to receiver, the others were inconsistent, likely cost the Broncos a playoff spot. Marino's comeback story and the fact that he still performed at a high level despite what could have been a career-ending injury definitely gives him the win this year. But Elway's tenacity, overcoming problems on his own team and still getting hit constantly and coming back for more, shows his work ethic, as he was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL all year. Next 95 would see the Broncos make some big changes. The Wade Phillips era had already come to an end just after 2 seasons. Now it was Mike Shanahan, who had worked closely with Elway in the past before as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator for the Broncos during 2 stints in the 1980s into the early 90s. Shanahan was just coming off being the offensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, who had just destroyed the Chargers in the Super Bowl. And a new running back by the name of Terrell Davis was drafted by the club. Hopefully he'll make a difference. The Dolphins had high hopes for Dan Marino to lead them to the promised land still. They looked like the odds-on favorites again to be a Super Bowl contender, as he was closing in also on 3 records. He was only 15 touchdown passes away from passing Fran Tarkenton for all-time touchdown passes, which if he stayed healthy, he definitely accomplished that without question, as Marino was second all-time in that category. He was also a mere 82 completions away from passing Tarkenton's in that category as well, as Elway was actually 5th all-time on that list. And of course, closing in on becoming the NFL's all-time leader in passing yards also held by Tarkenton. Marino less than 2,000 yards away. There's no doubt a healthy Marino can do this all in one season. In the season opener, Elway dominated a matchup against Jim Kelly as the Broncos hosted the Buffalo Bills in a Sunday night game, completing 22 passes and throwing for 317 yards in a 22-7 win. However, his hype showdown against 2-time Super Bowl winner Troy Aikman, the IT QB of this time, didn't fare as well. But it was more so running back Emmitt Smith who did the Broncos in on this night, winning 31-21. Elway played a beauty, engineering once again a late game winning drive, breaking a 31-31 tie with the Redskins, hitting Rod Smith, a prospective star receiver, with a 43-yard pass for a touchdown. And Elway completed 30 passes on the day and threw 2 touchdowns and threw for 327 yards. But Elway couldn't get the ball in the end zone in a 17-6 loss against the Chargers. The Broncos were now 2-2. As for Danny and the Dolphins and chasing those records, Danny Boy and the gang obliterated the lowly Jets 52-14, and he threw for 3 touchdowns. He only threw 6 incompletions, and the Dolphins' much improved running game and their awesome defense helped them beat Drew Bledsoe and the Patriots 28-3. The same happened against the Steelers, a 23-10 win for the Dolphins. They just keep rolling, baby. Then they win their 4th in a row, and Marino plays a beauty, completing 33 passes, throwing for 450 yards. He engineered a late game-winning drive as the Dolphins were down 23-19 as he had O.J. McDuffie from 16 yards out for a 26-23 win over a very game Cincinnati Bengals team. He now sits only 754 yards from being the all-time passing leader, 8 touchdown passes from the all-time record, and just 4 completions away from breaking that record as well. And it helped the Dolphins were first in the AFC East on top of all this. Elway threw many bad passes in a 27-10 loss to the Seahawks, and the Broncos fell to 2-3, but October 8th throttled the Patriots in a bit of an upset, as Terrell Davis had a breakout game with 97 yards rushing, but that wasn't the big story that day. The bigger story took place during a 4 o'clock game, as the undefeated Miami Dolphins faced a 2-2 Jim Harbaugh-led Indianapolis Colts. In the first quarter, Marino completed a pass to Keith Byers for a 6-yard gain. Joe Robbie Stadium erupted in joy. Dan Marino completes his 3,687th pass of his career, making him the all-time leader. The Miami fans, of course, give him a huge standing ovation for this moment. The rest of the game, however, didn't go so well. The Dolphins blew a 24-3 lead and lost 27-24 in overtime, beginning a 3-game losing skid. Marino missed the next game against the Saints, who were winless at the time. He also missed a shocking 17-16 loss against the Jets. The Dolphins fell just like that to 4-3 and were tied for second place with the Colts. Marino, however, triumphantly returned on October 29th at home as he got the better of his old rival Jim Kelly, and the Dolphins down the Bills 21-6. And then a win over the Chargers 24-14 saw him throw for 291 yards. Now he was just 37 yards away from becoming the NFL's all-time passing yards leader. Elway, meanwhile, was working his hardest as a 300-yard game and a win and shutout over the Raiders moved the Broncos to 4-3, but then they followed that up with a poor performance in a 21-7 loss to the Chiefs. However, he threw 3 touchdown passes as Terrell Davis was also unstoppable in a 38-6 win over the Cardinals, and they were now 5-4 in the AFC West. But the Chiefs and the Raiders were dominating, and the Broncos were barely holding off the Chargers, but still in line for a wild card spot. But another big day had arrived for Dan. In the first quarter against the New England Patriots, Marino found Irving Fryer down the sideline for a 9-yard completion. That was his 47,009th yard that he had thrown in his career. Make that record number 2 for Dan on the season. Another standing ovation. Getting these records set at home must have been glorious. The Dolphins, however, would fall to 6-4, losing 34-17. This would sadly begin a 3-game losing streak. They were humiliated on Monday Night Football against the 49ers and lost to the Colts as well, and they were now 6-6. But on that day in the fourth quarter, a 5-yard pass again to Irving Fryer gave him the NFL's all-time touchdown passing record with number 343. Things in Denver could never stay consistent. Elway was hurt early in a game against the Eagles, and the Broncos were beaten pretty easily, 31-13. But the next week, the Broncos' new star running back Terrell Davis ran for 176 yards and a 30-27 win over the Chargers. But then, a 42-23 loss to Houston. Despite a good game from Elway, followed that up. He did throw 2 costly picks. Now, both quarterbacks are facing 6-6 records, and the playoffs are hanging in the balance. Despite their identical records, the Dolphins are the ones hanging on to that final wildcard spot. Setting records was all good for Marino, and the Broncos having the running back of their dreams made their offense even better. It was great for Elway, but these men wanted a Super Bowl for God's sake. Marino and the Dolphins were able to slide by the Falcons after being down 29 in the fourth quarter, winning 21-20. Elway played excellently in a win over the expansion Jacksonville Jaguars, 31-23, throwing 4 touchdowns in the win. The Dolphins hang on and the Broncos remain in contention for another wildcard spot, and with the Raiders struggling, anything could happen. However, Elway was terrible, throwing 3 picks and his offensive line left him to dry yet again. Despite adding Gary Zimmerman to the lineup, a former Pro Bowler and future Hall of Famer, Elway was still getting beaten up, and the Broncos blew a 10-point lead, losing 31-27 to Seattle, while the Dolphins defense scored them a huge 13-6 upset win over the Chiefs. With their division rival Raiders on a 4-game losing streak, this would have been the game for the Broncos to win, and now Seattle is in contention with them, as are the red-hot Chargers. The Bills' defense crushed Marino, sacking him 3 times. Even though Marino outplayed Kelly, the Bills won due to a late field goal by Steve Christie, and the Broncos' playoff hopes were dashed in a loss against the Chiefs. The Dolphins clinched with a huge 41-22 win over the St. Louis Rams, while the Broncos would end the season strong, finishing 8-8 by playing spoiler, handing the Raiders their 6th straight loss, and officially eliminating them from the playoffs as well. And wouldn't you know it, awaiting Marino and company in the AFC wildcard round is their rivals, the Buffalo Bills. Kelly versus Marino. Here we go again. Miami's running game has improved this year, and it has been hit or miss, however. But the Bills, despite a setback last season, are itching to get back into the big game. Marino threw and threw and threw because Miami's ground game sucked in this game. What else is new now? And the Bills were up 27-0. Yeah. The Dolphins tried to make a game of it, but once again, Kelly is moving on. Marino was not. 37-22 win for the Bills. Statistically, it was Marino over Kelly, but as Marino set another record, attempting 64 passes and completing 33 of them in a playoff game, but he also threw 3 interceptions. But what this don't show is the fact that the Bills had nearly 350 yards rushing. 158 of those came, of course, from the great Thurman Thomas. Yes, Marino had another good year, but him missing those couple of games actually had him down in some statistical categories, but was still among the best among completion percentage. But the big story, however, are the records. Marino becomes the NFL's all-time completions, passing yards, and touchdown leader in the history of the league. Although they've been since passed, Marino's dominance was shown by setting these records. Also, he was selected to his 9th Pro Bowl to boot, on top of it all. Elway did the best he could, but this Broncos team was still trying to take shape. His numbers were good, but the team was still heading in the new direction and building into something more. But yet, time was ticking, much like it was for Marino. But again, we have to give this year to Marino, fighting through injuries to get the Dolphins to the playoffs, and asserted just how skilled he is by becoming an all-time leader in major statistical categories. In the offseason, a big dramatic change took place for the Dolphins. The great Don Shula, who coached the Dolphins to 2 Super Bowl wins and 3 appearances in the 1970s and 2 more in the 1980s, who coached the team for 26 seasons, stepped down. Taking over was Jimmy Johnson, the headline-making coach formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, who has spent the past couple years working for Fox Sports as an analyst, and hey, he brings 2 Super Bowl rings with him to Miami and knows how to utilize a successful QB star / big running game. And hey, now Marino finally has the running back he seems to need, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Stop that already, for crying out loud. I meant this guy. Yeesh. Anyway, the Broncos, on the other hand, going into the 1996 season, looked the best they had since the Dan Reeves days. They had a much tighter defense, one of the best offenses Elway ever worked with. Receivers such as Ed McCaffrey, Shannon Sharp, and Rod Smith was coming along. And of course, you had last year's breakout running back, Terrell Davis, but very importantly, this offensive line was starting to really thrive under the tutelage of Gary Zimmerman. And what do you know? Both teams got off to a 3-0 start. The Broncos started with a monster win at home, 31-6 over the lowly New York Jets, where Elway threw 2 touchdown passes. He'd do the same in a 30-20 road win in Seattle, and was able to guide the Broncos to a late game thrilling win over the upstart Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home, 27-23. In that string, Elway completed nearly 61.5% of his passes and threw for 5 touchdowns. Oh, the Broncos were looking sharp. On the Miami side of things, under their brand new coach, Danny and the boys started things off right. He only threw 6 incompletions in a 24-10 win at home against division rival New England. He only threw 9 incompletions in a 38-10 throttling of the Cardinals, and threw for 3 touchdown passes in a home win, 36-27 over the Jets. Danny Boy didn't need to throw the ball as much as he used to now, with the strongest running game Miami has had since his arrival. But when he did, he was on fire, completing just over 63% of his passes, 5 touchdowns, and just 2 interceptions. It seems as though both QBs now have the team that they need to get them their championship. In Week 4, however, Elway played very poorly in a loss to the Chiefs, and then Marino got hurt in a Monday night game against the Colts, which was a defensive battle resulting in a 10-6 loss. Miami thankfully had a bye week, and the Broncos had to face a lowly Bengals, which Elway still threw for over 300 yards in a 14-10 win on the road, and they moved to 4-1. The Dolphins returned to action the next week, and without Marino, and a loss to the Seahawks, a win over the Bills, and a loss to the Eagles followed in the 3 games that Dan would miss. The Broncos continued to roll, and at home a huge 28-17 win, as Elway and Shannon Sharpe were just on fire. Elway completed 32 passes, throwing just 9 incompletions and 4 touchdown passes, 3 of them to Sharpe, and then followed that up in a shootout with the Ravens, a 45-34 win, throwing for over 300 yards yet again and 3 touchdowns again. And hey, look at this, another 3-game winning streak for Denver, moving to 6-1 on the year. Elway was brilliant in that stretch, an amazing 984 yards passing, completing nearly, get this, 68.5% of his passes, and 9 touchdown passes compared to just 3 interceptions. But now going into Week 9, it was a big day for both teams. The Broncos had a chance to keep dominating their division, and perhaps go 7-1 against the only team they lost to so far this year, the Chiefs, while Marino returns to the Dolphins in a huge game against the defending Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys. A very personal game for Coach Jimmy Johnson to boot, as controversy still surrounds his departure from that team. Troy Aikman outplayed Marino like a machine, as he and receiver Michael Irvin put the Dolphins down 29-10 on their own field. The Dolphins fall to 4-4. The Broncos, however, indeed are dominant over the Chiefs, 34-7 at home. Elway again throwing 3 touchdowns, and more importantly, moving to 7-1 on the season. The last time they did that was 1986, the year they made it to the Super Bowl. Marino then got hurt again in a 45-23 loss to the Patriots on the road, whereas Elway's late game heroics gave the Broncos a thrilling 22-21 win over the Raiders. Marino, however, was back for the next game in a much-needed 37-13 throttling over the Colts, where he threw just 6 incompletions and 3 touchdowns, while the Broncos won a defense low-scoring game against the Bears, and now have won 6 in a row. A late field goal gave Miami a huge win over Houston, 23-20, while Elway and Bledsoe squared off, and the Broncos got the better of the Pats, 34-8. Miami was clinging to wildcard hopes like they did last season, and were just barely outside of the picture with a lot of teams still well within reach. But then they dropped 2 back-to-back losses, the Steelers and the Raiders, the latter of which Marino played awful. The Broncos won their next 2 games. Elway was great, a 21-17 squeaker against the Vikings, and then a 34-7 thrashing of the Seahawks back home. The Broncos were now 12-1, a 9-game winning streak, their longest single-season winning streak ever. Miami's playoff hopes, however, were on life support. They were pretty much flatlined against the Giants. It was not a good night for Marino, while the Broncos' win streak was halted in a brutal 41-6 loss to the Packers. But for those thinking it was Favre versus Elway, well, John did not play. But it didn't matter, as the Broncos clinched the division, and they'd be going back to the playoffs for the first time since 1993, and won their first division title since 1991. Elway returned the next week in a win over the Raiders, and that would be the final showdown between Marino and Kelly. It was a close-knit game, but Dan was able to get the better of his rival one more time in their last game against one another, 16-14. Kelly would retire in the offseason, meaning Elway and Marino were two of the only quarterbacks left from the class of '83. The Dolphins would beat the Jets to finish the season 8-8 and would miss the playoffs, and Marino's chances just got slimmer. The Broncos would lose a meaningless game to the Chargers to end the season. Elway only played a quarter and a half or so. So now this is it. This is John's chance to seize the biggest opportunity since the glory days of the Broncos in the 1980s. Awaiting the Broncos was a team nobody expected to make the playoffs, let alone be in the divisional round, the second-year Jacksonville Jaguars, who were 4-7 to start the season and then ended it on a huge 5-game winning streak. They were led by quarterback Mark Brunell. The Jags caught the attention of NFL fans across the nation and beyond. Brunell actually led the NFL in passing yards, was in the top 10 in other huge categories. They also had star receiver Jimmy Smith and a decent running game with former Chargers star Natrone Means. Also, Brunell could run the ball himself, as could James Stewart. But the team's defense was something many experts felt the Broncos could just tear apart with their offense. In the first quarter, the Broncos struck first blood. A Von Hebron 1-yard plunge with the Broncos up. Then Elway found Shannon Sharp from 18 yards out. Both TDs, however, had failed converts, but the Broncos still led 12-0 after a quarter. The Broncos defense played very well, not allowing the Jags to get a first down all quarter. Well, as I like to say, the Cinderella story is about to turn into the proverbial pumpkin. But in the second quarter, something happened. The Jags moved the ball thanks to Means and got on the board with a 45-yard field goal. Then Brunell proceeded to engineer an 80-yard drive, but then the Broncos get a pick. No, just a very controversial pass interference call negates that. Means strikes again, an 8-yard TD run. The Jags are only down by 2. The Jags get the ball back again, and Brunell hits Smith on a long pass to set up another field goal. It's 13-12 Jags at the half. What in the son of a motherless goat is going on here? Okay, well, let's not worry. The Broncos will regroup and move the ball just 37 yards in the third quarter against this defense. The Jags are coming up in the clutch. I gotta give it to them. And they only score the third quarter after Denver takes countless idiotic penalties. Brunell hits Keenan McCardle for a 31-yard pass for the touchdown. 20-12 Jags after 3. Are you kidding me? And early in the fourth quarter, with just around 11 minutes to go, the Jags took a 23-12 lead. I swear, 75,000 fans, I've never heard them this silent in any given stadium, let alone Mile High Stadium on this night. The most silent they'd been all year. However, many weren't panicking. After all, we're looking at the king of the comebacks here, John Elway. And he'll no doubt get the Broncos back into this thing. The fans woke up after a kickoff return, put the Broncos close to Jags territory. Time for old John to go to work. We are down to the 2-yard line. The fans are going crazy. Davis makes a 2-yard run, then a successful 2-point convert as Mile High Stadium erupts in joy. The Broncos only now trail by 3 at 23-20. Oh, it ain't over. But Mark Brunell, to his credit, remained calm and collected and avoided Denver tacklers like Willie Nelson avoiding the IRS and made a 20-yard gain, setting up a touchdown pass to Smith. The Jags are up 30-20 with 3:39 to go. But Elway was not licked yet. He engineered an 80-yard drive, culminating in a 15-yard pass to Ed McCaffrey, and the Broncos again trail by 3. Oh, what a game. But they have no timeouts left. It all depends on the onside kick. The Jags hang on. It's the NFL after all. The game is over with just under 2 minutes to go. This has to be, without a doubt, the most devastating loss of John Elway's career. People thought it was now or never. This could very well be John's last chance. At this point, it looked like neither of our heroes were going to triumph with the big championship. Elway didn't play bad. Brunell simply played better. And Means had 186 all-purpose yards compared to just 115 from Terrell Davis. The Jags were just a better team on this day. But it meant the epic season, the best the Broncos had all decade, was finished. The Jags' miracle run, however, did come to an end against the Patriots in the AFC Championship. They actually said that for the first time ever, John Elway cried after a loss. Can you blame him after this one? Marino's season was one of the most forgettable of his career. It seemed he did manage to finish, 6th in passer rating after all, but his numbers were by no means bad whatsoever. Just Miami seemed incomplete somehow without Shula and just not adjusting to Jimmy Johnson. As for Elway, despite the season-ending heartbreak, it was one of the greatest seasons of his career. He was 5th in completion percentage, and 4th in both touchdown passes and league passer rating. He was 2nd in MVP voting, just losing to Brett Favre, and 3rd in Offensive Player of the Year voting, losing to teammate Terrell Davis. He obtained his 7th Pro Bowl selection, and his 3rd second-team All-Pro selection. But still, no Super Bowl. There's no doubt this year goes to Elway. He played with such determination you could see he wanted worse than ever to bring home a championship, even if he couldn't make it happen this season. Now both of our heroes are about to enter their 15th season. Neither of them has tasted championship glory, has accomplished so much, however, in their great careers. The Jimmy Johnson experiment in Miami was not successful in its first season. When a coach has been a part of a team as long as Shula was, well, a hangover is bound to happen. The Broncos have a championship caliber team. They just have to actually win one. As the 1997 season was about to begin, the Broncos made another change: their logo and their uniforms. Looked like a USFL reject as far as I was concerned at the time, but over the years it's grown on me. And the Broncos, they started hot. A 6-game winning streak to start the season. It started with a 19-9 win over the Chiefs, as Elway and the Broncos defense looked great. Elway then went head-to-head with another great quarterback without a Super Bowl ring, Warren Moon, and the Broncos triumphed 35-14 over the Seahawks. And then a 35-14 win over the Rams. A 38-20 win over the Bengals. They held off a Falcons comeback 29-21 that handed the Patriots their first loss of the year in a 34-13 win. Elway looked incredible, throwing nearly 1,300 yards, completing just over 57% of his passes, and tossing 12 touchdowns. Dan and the Dolphins started their season right as their defense, being emphasized as their strongest point, helped them pull out a 16-10 win over the Colts at home, Marino only completing, however, 10 passes. He looked better the next week in a 16-13 overtime win over the Oilers. Dan threw 26 incompletions, however, in a loss against the defending Super Bowl champion Green Bay Packers and was outplayed heavily by Brett Favre in a 23-18 loss. They also would lose the Battle of Florida, 31-21 to Tampa, as Miami's once promising running game was starting to look a little weak. After a needed bye week, a late field goal by Lindo Murray helped the Dolphins scrape by the Chiefs 17-14. The same week, the Broncos had a bye week after their huge 6-game start. The Dolphins downed the Jets on the road 31-20, and Marino played his best game of the year so far, completing 27 passes and throwing 2 touchdowns with no picks and 372 yards. In Week 8, the Dolphins' good fortune continued with a 24-13 win over the Ravens, and the Broncos' comeback attempt fell short against the Raiders, losing 28-25, ending their hot streak. Then Marino got outplayed by Eric Kramer, of all people. A very thrilling 36-33 overtime loss to the Bears, a huge upset as the Bears had yet to win a game all year until that day. The Dolphins at the halfway point were 5-3 and barely clinging on to first, as the Pats and the Jets were also 5-3. The Broncos rebounded with an overtime thriller of their own as they blew a 20-0 lead against the Bills, but won with a field goal in the extra frame as the Broncos were ruling with a 7-1 record, but the Chiefs weren't all that far behind at 6-2. Elway vs. Moon took place once again next week, this time at Mile High Stadium, where the fans were treated to a show as the 2 legendary QBs squared off in a seesaw battle that saw the Broncos squeak out with a 30-27 win. Marino didn't make it to the end of a battle with the Bills, who, despite Jim Kelly no longer being around, the Bills still got the better of the fish in a defensive, not at all decisive, 9-6 win. The Dolphins then downed the Jets in a solid outing, 24-17, while the Broncos crushed the Carolina Panthers, 34-0. Once again, like many times throughout his career, Elway was the victim of a pulverizing defense, but to be fair, the offensive line was much better this year, but he was still sacked 6 times in a loss to the Chiefs, 24-22. And coincidentally, that is where former Dolphins kicker Pete Stoyanovich now plays and did them in at the end. The Dolphins then moved to 7-4, getting revenge on the Bills with a 30-13 win. Elway then helped the Broncos move to 10-2 in a dominant 31-3 win over the Raiders, and the talks of a possible Super Bowl win were surfacing again. The Dolphins, however, found themselves 27-3 to the Pats, and Marino threw 3 picks, losing the game, or so it seemed anyway, but engineered a huge comeback that led to Abdul-Jabbar scoring 3 touchdowns, but they did fall short in the end, 27-24. Both star QBs led their teams to big wins the next week, the Broncos downing San Diego 38-28, and the Dolphins beating the Raiders 34-16. Elway, however, played the worst game of his season so far, throwing 25 incompletions in a loss to the Steelers on the road, while Marino and the Dolphins won a thriller over the Lions. With 2 games to go, both teams were looking good. The Broncos were barely holding off the Chiefs, however, while the Dolphins were also trying to hold off the Patriots and the Jets. However, the following week, Elway had another terrible outing in a 34-17 loss to the Niners, while Marino also played awful and also got hurt in a horrendous 41-0 thrashing at the hands of the lowly Colts, who had won 2 games all year going into that battle. This means the Chiefs moved past the Broncos for first place. However, the Dolphins were lucky in the sense that the Patriots lost as well. However, the Jets had won. The Oilers, however, eliminated themselves from wildcard contention, meaning the Jets were literally the only team that could swoop in. On the Denver side of things, Elway threw 4 touchdown passes and a 38-33 embarrassment of the Chargers, but the Chiefs beat the Saints, meaning while the Broncos lose the division, they do clinch a playoff spot. However, the Jets lost in a tight battle to Detroit, meaning the Dolphins and Pats would compete for first place. The Dolphins lost, but they still got a playoff berth. Once again, both icons are aiming for that first championship. And look at this. Yes, in the wildcard round, Elway and the Broncos once again have to contend with the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team even better than they were last season. Brunell had another great year at quarterback. Jimmy Smith had another all-pro season, but once again, the Jags' weakness was their defense. And what happened last year is on the mind of the Broncos, on the line of NFL pundits and experts, on the line of the fans, and more importantly, maybe even on the mind of John Elway. But there's a difference between having something on your mind and then dwelling on it. Elway didn't do that here. This was going to be nothing like the year before. The Broncos took a 21-0 lead in the second quarter. However, in the third quarter, the Jags made it 21-17. Oh, no, this could not be happening, and it's not. Denver's running game is ultimately what does the Jags in. 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, a huge redemption moment for the Broncos as they take apart the Jaguars. 42-17 win and a sweet redemption, their first playoff game win since 1991. Elway was excellent, only threw 8 incompletions and his 223 yards was all part of a 533 total yards on offense compared to the Jags' 253. A sweet victory. Brunell was unable to work his magic this time. Elway's passion was shining through. Now let's see if Big Dan can make the most of his chance. They were taking on the defending AFC champions, the New England Patriots, led by Drew Bledsoe, red-hot star QB, as well as an awesome tight end Ben Coates, receiver Terry Glenn, superb linebacker Chris Slade, and safety Larry Wingham. But they were without star running back Curtis Martin. This could be a big for the defensive-minded Dolphins. And indeed, defense was the name of the game, and Marino was awful, as were the receivers, and Bledsoe, to be fair, wasn't all that much better. A very anticlimactic 17-3 win for the Pats. Dan's dreams again are once again dashed, as he throws 2 picks and 25 incompletions. Actually, more than that. For Elway and the Broncos, the journey continued into the AFC Divisional Playoff round, taking on a team that edged them out for the division title, the Kansas City Chiefs. The team was led by a highly talented QB by the name of Elvis Gerbach, a tremendous fullback in Kimball Anders, and the controversial yet immensely talented Andre Rison at receiver. On defense, you had the great Derek Thomas at linebacker, as well as Dale Carter and James Hasty leading a great defensive core. The Chiefs have been a successful team for a few seasons, but could never get past a certain point, so they were hungry. It was a very defensive game as Davis kept scrambling for yards and just kept scampering along, but couldn't quite get there, but eventually would in occasional runs. But the Broncos had trouble finding the end zone. However, in the second quarter, Elway went to work. A huge completion of 27 yards to Dwayne Carswell, and then a successful 3rd and 7 conversion to the 4th-yard line, all led to Davis plunging in from a yard out, giving the Broncos a 7-0 lead at halftime. Pete Stoyanovich got the Chiefs on the board in the third quarter, cutting Denver's lead to 4. And then Gerbach hit Tony Gonzalez for a 12-yard touchdown to give the Chiefs a 10-7 lead. But early in the fourth quarter, Elway completed a 43-yard pass to Ed McCaffrey, setting up another Terrell Davis touchdown. 14-10 lead. The Broncos were trying to add to their lead, but the Chiefs defense stepped up. And it looked at last Gerbach was going to be the Elway for this game. A pass interference penalty plus a risky 4th and 9 gamble paid off and a 23-yard pass to Andre Rison to top it all off. But the Chiefs at the Denver 28. But the next 3 plays, they only got them to the 20. Now with 12 seconds left, will Gerback stick the dagger in the Broncos' chances? On 4th down, he looks to the end zone. The pass is knocked down. For the first time since 1991, the Broncos will play in the AFC Championship. Elway didn't play an outstanding game, but he walked away with a W and getting his team one step closer to the big game. So now here we go. The AFC Championship, and then the Broncos' way, a team that only 2 years earlier had ventured into the Super Bowl, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Coached by Bill Cowher, the Steelers team was combined with talent and grit, the same type of style that built their legacy in the 1970s. They had a dynamically multi-talented Cordell Stewart at the helm at quarterback. You had megastar Jerome the Bus Bettis in the backfield, Pro Bowl receiver Yancey Thigpen, and you had an amazing defensive strength with Joel Steed up front, the ever-popular Levon Kirkland at linebacker, and the highly underrated Carnell Lake at defensive back, another longtime fan favorite to boot. Choosing a winner in this one was hard for the odds makers, but man, somebody felt that the Steelers would edge Denver out. It didn't look good for the Broncos at first. Elway threw what would have been a costly pick, but the Steelers missed a field goal attempt. And then Terrell Davis would take off for a 43-yard run right to the Steelers' 29, and a few plays later, Davis ran it in from 8 yards out, 7-0 Broncos. A good kickoff return set up the Steelers nicely on their next drive, and Stewart would make a huge play running 33 yards out for the tying touchdown, 7-7 after 1. The Broncos didn't respond right away as in the second quarter, but Steelers' drive culminated in a touchdown. This one a yard out for the bus to give the Steelers a 14-7 lead. Elway then engineered a very smart and brilliant drive that led to a 43-yard field goal to close the gap to 14-10. However, it looked as if the Steelers were ready to extend their lead. Stewart was forced to throw into double coverage, and the ball was intercepted by veteran Ray Crockett. And Elway engineered another smart drive, only this one culminated in a touchdown to 15-yard pass to fullback Howard Griffith. The Broncos had the lead back 17-14. The Steelers, however, were forced to punt. Elway again took the ball down deep into Steelers territory. A nice toss to McCaffrey, and all of a sudden the Broncos are up 24-10. A 10-point lead at the half. It looked as if the Steelers were going to close the gap in the third quarter and were on the Denver 5-yard line, but a bad throw from Stewart led to another pick. The Broncos stuffed them. But the Steelers' defense was finally responding, but so was Denver's to boot. Neither team could get much going offensively, and that included the fourth quarter. Elway and the Broncos could almost taste it, a trip to the big game, but wait! Stewart completes 7 of 8 passes on a drive that led to a 15-yard Charles Johnson reception for the touchdown to close the gap to 3 points, just 2:46 left in the game. But Elway, being the general he is, 18-yard completion to Sharp, 10-yard completion to McCaffrey, a fresh set of downs, and that's all he needed. John Elway, the Denver Broncos, for the first time in 8 years, are going to the Super Bowl. Elway's strategic prowess was on display. He commanded drives, relied on his reliable backfield and clutch receiving core, and was rewarded with a berth in the big game, the 4th of his career. But guess who was awaiting he and his team? The defending Super Bowl champion Green Bay Packers and their star quarterback Brett Favre. Favre had been setting Green Bay and the NFL on fire. He had, I guess you could say, taken the Troy Aikman spot as the it quarterback of the NFL. He had indeed become their poster boy. He and the Packers were the toast of the league. The Packers started rebuilding, acquiring Favre in 1992. Now here he is playing in his second straight Super Bowl with a ring already on his finger. Elway was playing in his 4th, with no rings to show for it. In addition to Favre, he had his favorite targets, Antonio Freeman and Mark Chmura. Also, running back Dorsey Levens had a career year. On the other side of the ball, Elway had many factors to worry about, but 2 stood out. Strong safety Leroy Butler, and the Minister of Defense up front, the one and only Reggie White. Coached by Mike Holmgren, this Packers team was ready to be a dynasty, and that's how many viewed as happening in the NFL for the late 90s. And I remember the lead up to this game, the Elway versus Favre hype, but the emphasis was put on if Elway could outplay Favre. Favre is already at the highest level, but with back-to-back Super Bowl wins, he could reach a whole other one. For Elway, some saw it as his likely last chance to be a champion, accomplish what our fellow hero still hasn't to this day. He hasn't even had a second chance to do, something that another peer from the class of 1983, Jim Kelly, had attempted 4 times but couldn't do. Other greats such as Warren Moon haven't made it to the big dance. For the 3 chances Elway had, Phil Simms proved he was a smarter QB in Super Bowl 21. Doug Williams played the game of his life as if it was in Super Bowl 22. Two of the QBs Elway probably had greater careers then. And to top it off, however, a man considered to be one of the best of all time, Joe Montana, pulverized his team in Super Bowl 24. He watched as other legends such as Steve Young and Troy Aikman amass championship success. He watched talents like Jim Plunkett, who was a great playoff quarterback at his time, win the big one. Plunkett was on the level of Elway overall in his career. Neither was Jim McMahon, Jeff Hostetler, or Mark Ripien, but they could all call themselves champions. Now, he's facing the best in the game today. Here we go. Super Bowl 32, January 25th, 1998, San Diego, California. The Packers received the opening kickoff. Favre didn't waste any time. Dorsey Levens, who was also doing some damage on the ground, had a huge 13-yard pass to Freeman, and then 22-yard pass into the end zone. The Packers draw first blood 7-0. But it was way too early to panic. After a good kick return, the Broncos began a drive from their 42-yard line. Davis went to work, running the ball 27 yards, ending up at the Packers' 14. Elway would then scramble to the 10-yard line to the 2-yard line. I bet that's all he runs today. 2 plays later, Davis plunges in from 1 yard in. It was tied 7-7. That's how it would stay after one quarter, as they could not get the ball moving any further. And Favre also threw a pick, but the Broncos just couldn't capitalize. But the Broncos got to scare us. Terrell Davis was doing great on a drive. He was inadvertently tripped and suffered obscured vision and a massive migraine headache. Probably a concussion to boot. A few plays later, he returned to the field in a fake handoff play despite his vision still blurred, which was key to Denver's drive as Elway rushed into the end zone from a yard out. As the defense was already drawn to Davis, the Broncos now lead 14-7. Davis would take migraine meds and return to the game fully, however. Veteran Bronco and future Hall of Famer Steve Atwater jarred Brett Favre, who fumbled, and Doug Smith recovered it and later set up a Jason Elam 51-yard field goal. The Broncos were up 10 points, 17-7. The Packers found themselves buried deep on their own 5, but Favre, like he often does, showed his brilliance, engineering a 95-yard drive that ate up almost half the quarter and hitting Mark Chmura in the end zone from 6 yards out. The Broncos' lead has been cut to 3, 17-14 at the half. On the first play from scrimmage in the second half, Davis fumbled and the Packers got the ball back. But the Broncos defense stopped the Packers, but on their field goal attempt, the Broncos were called offside. However, that stopped them again, and this time there was no penalty on the field goal, but the game was now tied 17-17. Neither team could get anything going on their next drives as both defenses were stellar. Later on, the Broncos found themselves buried on their 8-yard line. This is where Elway needs to go to work. Elway on this drive would throw his longest pass of the game, 36-yard pass to McCaffrey. The Broncos were in the red zone. It was 3rd and 6 from the Packers' 12. Elway saw an opening, and at 37 years old, with all the heart and soul of a man who wants to win this game, leaped in an attempt to get the first down, was hit by a couple Packers defenders, causing him to spin like a helicopter, landing 2 yards ahead of the first down marker for the first down. The visual of Elway's helicopter spin, something to behold to this very day. It's the biggest 8 yards of his career. That one play showed how hell-bent he was on not walking out of this game a loser. A true highlight reel moment. He knew this could be his last chance. He was willing to put himself out there to win it all. It paid off a couple plays later as Davis scored another 1-yard touchdown and the Broncos led 24-17. However, late in the quarter, the Denver had a chance to extend their lead after recovering a fumble, but Eugene Robinson intercepted the ball and returned it to his own 15. The third quarter ended with the Packers having the ball, and the fourth, to begin things, Favre and Freeman show took center stage, ended with Freeman catching a 13-yard touchdown pass. The game was tied at 24. Oh boy. It later looked like the Packers would get a chance to take a lead on their next drive, but a great play from Steve Atwater got the Pack at a field goal range. The Broncos defense was stellar in this quarter, and Denver made a crucial 3-and-out and got the ball back with 3:27 to go. Time to go to work, John. A costly penalty moved the Broncos forward into Packers territory, and Elway's 23-yard pass to Griffith got them deep in the red zone. However, a holding penalty pushed them back, but it didn't matter as Davis ran 17 yards to the 1. 2nd and goal. 1:47 to go. TD with the TD, his third of the game. The Broncos lead 31-24, but the Packers still had their timeouts remaining. And this is Brett Favre. This could very well force overtime. No Super Bowl game has ever gone into overtime at this point. A big pass from Favre to Levens got them in Denver territory with 1:30 to play as the hurry-up offense kept it going. They burned off 19 seconds but gained no yards, burning up a timeout but still had one remaining. Favre hit Levens for 13 yards, who got out of bounds. There's still over a minute to play. Elway is watching intently from the sidelines. The Packers were on the Broncos 35. Levens gains 4 yards, but he was stopped in bounds. On the next play, the clock was winding down. Freeman can't handle a pass. It's now 3rd down with 37 seconds to play. And a pass to attempt to Robert Brooks led to an ugly collision where he, Atwater, and Randy Hillard all were injured and took them out of the game. The passover was incomplete. It's now 4th and 6. This is it right here. 32 seconds to play. The pass intended for Mark Chmura. Broken up by John Mobley. No flags on the play. The Denver Broncos, John Elway, Super Bowl champions. The smile on Elway's face, miles long, said it all. A journey of 15 seasons. On his 4th appearance in the big game, etched his legacy once and for all. And no, Elway didn't outplay Favre. The night belonged to Terrell Davis, who was named Game MVP. But you could also have given it to many members of Denver's defense. But all the hype of Elway needing to outplay Favre was, well, as the oldies say, hogwash. Because you don't need to outplay someone to beat them. It was Elway's passion and heart that outshined Favre on this day. The visual of that infamous helicopter spin truly made Elway into an unarguable legend, right alongside The Drive. The glory of the moment where Elway held the Vince Lombardi trophy in his hands in triumph just screams the word, it's all been worth it. It's all been worth it. A perfect storybook ending. But was it really the end? Rumors of Elway's retirement were clearly swirling. A lot of us sports fans were expecting that to come any day now. But regardless, that feeling at that moment echoed through the PA system. This one's for John. For Dan, he still looked good, as he was 3rd in passing yards and 1st in completions for the first time since 1992, and the 6th time in his career. But in the grand scheme of his career, it was not an overly memorable year. Just seeing the team could never adjust to Jimmy Johnson fully as their head coach. The weak Miami running game gave the aging quarterback no relief. Abdul-Jabbar still looked sharp, but not as sharp as they were hoping. As for Elway, well, what can you say? It was the year where he separated himself from many of his peers by obtaining the Holy Grail. The first in Broncos history, the first of his illustrious career. And on top of that, he was once again 4th in touchdown passes and selected for his 8th Pro Bowl. But that all pales in comparison to that epic moment. And yes, this year belongs to John hands down. Is there ever really any doubt about that one? However, the announcement fans were thinking was coming never came. Elway was going to be back for the 1998 season. Winning the championship and going out on top of the world would be ideal, but Elway felt that defending the championship was another big opportunity that he was never afforded before, and he felt he had one more year left in him. As for Marino, he wasn't ready to let his dream die either, also prepared for his 16th season. The Dolphins looked stronger than they had on paper, and what was being the 3rd season of the Jimmy Johnson era. The champs received a hero's welcome to open the season at Mile High Stadium as Elway led the charge to take on the New England Patriots. And it began something huge for Denver. Out of the gate, they were smooth against the Pats, a 27-21 win where Elway threw just 12 incompletions. The next week, the Broncos galloped away with a 42-23 win over the Cowboys, where Elway threw just 6 incompletions and 2 touchdowns. Despite looking good early on against the Raiders on the road, Elway was hurt and needed to be replaced by backup veteran quarterback Bubby Brister, best known for his days with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brister and the Broncos still got the win. John was looking good before his injury, and now the naysayers were quick to come out saying he just should have retired after winning the big game. He's now too old and too fragile, yada yada yada, you know where to stick it. But in those first 3 games alone, he completed nearly 66.7% of his passes, and the Broncos were 3-0. Now in Miami, their defense got them off to a good start, but Dan still did what he could, and they were able to obtain a 24-15 win on the road against the Colts, which, by the way, was a very historic debut of some guy named Peyton Manning, who looked sharp, but threw 3 costly picks for the Colts. Miami's defense was on their game in a 13-7 win over the Bills following that, and also a 21-0 win over the Steelers, starting the season 3-0. Marino's numbers weren't mind-blowing here, but he was playing fine, completing 57% of his passes, and the Dolphins again were a very defensive-minded club at this point. It was winning them games with the likes of Zach Thomas leading the way. No complaints here. The Broncos won the next 2 games with Bubby Brister at QB over the Redskins and Eagles. And Elway returned for a game on the road against the Seahawks. He still looked banged up, but gritted through the pain, helped Denver to a 21-16 win to move them to 6-0. The Dolphins would suffer their first loss 20-9 to a revamped New York Jets team led by Vinny Testaverde at quarterback. Marino still hadn't thrown 200 yards yet this season. He would throw 323, however, the next week, but they'd fall apart in a loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the fourth quarter. But again, it was the Miami defense who came through the next week in a 14-0 win over the Rams. Speaking of the Jags, Elway and Brunell had another big showdown, and Elway and the Broncos were the winners, 37-24. And then won a surprisingly great game against the Bengals, 33-26, after a late TD by TD. And the Broncos were 8-0, looking unstoppable. As for the Dolphins, Marino threw 3 picks, but the defense bailed him out in a 12-9 win over the Patriots. Then it was Marino versus Flutie. As a matter of fact, the last time these two faced each other was in November of 1988. 2 games that month. They split the victories. But don't get me wrong, it's not as if Flutie outplayed Marino in either one. However, since Flutie left the NFL after 1989, he became a legend and an icon in the Canadian Football League, and is arguably the greatest and most dominant quarterback in the history of that league. And now his success there made NFL teams take notice. He was now playing for the Bills. And like Jim Kelly before him, Flutie made it a long night for Marino. Their stats were almost dead even in many categories, but the Dolphins collapsed in the fourth, letting go of a 24-14 lead and losing 30-24. Flutie wins the rubber match. The AFC East is very tightly knit. 4 teams, including the Dolphins, held records of 5-3 at the halfway point. As the Broncos looked to continue to surge forward, Elway was hurt again, this time early in the first quarter. Brister took over, and the Broncos stayed undefeated, with a 27-10 win over the Chiefs. While Brister started the next week in a 37 win over the Chiefs, the team was now 10-0. Terrell Davis was just having a mind-blowing Barry Sanders-level season at this point, too. Meanwhile, Marino again took Manning to school in a 27-14 win over the Colts. And again, the defense rising out 13-9 win over the Panthers. The Dolphins were looking really good at 7-3. But how about those Broncos? Elway returning a huge dominant win over the Raiders, 40-14 at home, tossing 3 touchdowns and only throwing 8 incompletions. Elway then threw 4 touchdowns in a 31-16 win over the Chargers, and they would get a huge win over the Chiefs as Elway played the way he has played his whole career. They were down 31-21 in the fourth quarter, their perfect season about to end, but Elway kept it going, entering a drive culminating in a TD by, yes, TD. But then later in the game, Elway found Shannon Sharp from 24 yards out. The Broncos led 35-31 and won the game. Elway had one more fourth quarter clutch performance in him and played an incredible game, throwing for 400 yards, and the Broncos were now 13-0 as the comparison to the 1972 Dolphins was abounding in the media. Could the Broncos do the impossible? Many were starting to believe if they could win games without Elway, just imagine how many more they can win with him. This team is just too perfect up and down the line. Even their 36-year-old backup quarterback, who had started a game in 3 years, he kept the ship steering while John was injured. But now to the Dolphins. Marino looked good against the Pats, but Bledsoe played the game of his life, and the Dolphins again let a late lead slip in a 26-23 loss. But the combo of Marino and McDuffie helped the Dolphins dominate 30-10 over the Saints, and then 27-17 over the Raiders. In the standings, the Broncos had already punched their ticket and won the division, as if there was any doubt at this point. The Dolphins had the same record as the first-place Jets in the AFC East, which was still a tight division where nobody was dominant, and the Dolphins were in a good position. The Dolphins, however, suffered a huge loss against the Jets the following week, as Marino showed down with a highly talented Vinny Testaverde, and they came up short 21-16. And the Bills had also won that week, and the Pats, however, had lost, and a few teams were eliminated from wildcard contention, so the Dolphins were not quite yet in danger. As for the Broncos, their dreams of a perfect season came to a sad end. Leading 16-13 against the upstart New York Giants on the road, football fans were shocked when the Giants scored a touchdown with under a minute to play and time ran out on the Broncos, and they lost 20-16. But in Week 16, we truly get Elway versus Marino. For the first time since their respective third seasons, the two legends play each other for only the second time in their careers. The Dolphins could officially punch their playoff ticket. The Broncos already have their spot. This is a treat. As I mentioned before, the last time they faced each other, Marino was the man in the NFL. Elway hadn't even come close to hitting his best years yet. It was an exciting back-and-forth game, but Marino outplayed his counterpart in a 30-26 win. Both men were different. Some saw Marino as being in decline at this point, having accomplished breaking all the big records, and Elway was still playing at some of his best games. Even as he approaches the end, and the stage, Monday Night Football. In a way, I think the NFL knew this could very well be the last time these two faced one another. The only scoring in the first quarter came in a Jason Elam field goal, and the Broncos, on a weird play after a fumble in the end zone, was recovered by Rod Smith, and Denver was up 10-0. With a minute to go in the quarter, Marino, however, found Lamar Thomas from 9 yards out to get them on the board, but the Broncos added another field goal. They led 13-7 at the half. In the third quarter, the old Dan Marino came to life. A 56-yard touchdown pass to Thomas, and then a 17-yard touchdown pass for Thomas. Marino and Thomas were just on fire, and the Broncos couldn't move the ball, as even Terrell Davis played his worst game of the year. It didn't help that Elway threw two costly picks to boot, and the Dolphins took a 28-13 lead. Marino threw his fourth touchdown of the game. However, Von Hebron returned the ensuing kickoff 95 yards for a touchdown, and Brister came in to make a 2-point convert to McCaffrey. But the Dolphins added a field goal. That was all she wrote. A 31-21 win and a Dolphins playoff berth secure. An emphatic statement by Marino to Elway. Even that it wasn't his goal necessarily, he said, "I'm not done yet. I too want a Super Bowl, and I will fight to get it every bit as much as you did," is the message Marino sent non-verbally, I might add, to Elway. This night belonged to him. The Broncos only had 225 yards of offense. Miami had nearly 400. Marino threw for 355 yards and 4 touchdowns. Elway threw for just 151 through 23 incompletions and 2 picks. The Dolphins ended their season losing to the very exciting Falcons team, while the Broncos looked much better, however, in a 28-21 win over the Seahawks. Elway completes 26 passes, throws for over 300 yards, and tosses 4 touchdowns to help him finish the best season the Broncos ever had, 14-2. Now it's playoff time, and this Dolphin team seemed more hell-bent than ever than a win. And their heated rivals, the Buffalo Bills, awaited them. The Bills' success had subsided, but they were still a perennial playoff team, with Pro Bowl quarterback Doug Flutie at the helm, and his favorite targets the great Andre Reed and the exciting Eric Moulds. On defense, they had the sackmaster, Bruce Smith, still playing some great football. The game took place in Miami. The Dolphins took an early 6-0 lead about a second quarter after 2 field goals. However, Flutie went to work and drove the Bills, and Thurman Thomas would plunge into the end zone, 7-6 Bills. They were about to extend the lead, but Flutie threw a very bad interception in the end zone. It remains 7-6 at the half. In the third quarter, neither team could get anything going, however, after O.J. McDuffie made a big punt return, and Marino smartly ate some time off the clock on a drive that led to a 3-yard run from Abdul-Jabbar, and a 2-point convert gave them a 14-7 lead. But Flutie would roar back and toss a 32-yard pass to Moulds, and the game was tied 14-14 after 3 quarters. The Dolphins gave them the field goal to make it 17-14, but yet another Bills turnover allowed Marino to go back in and hit Lamar Thomas from 12 yards out. The Dolphins led by 10. The erratic behavior of Andre Reed, who overdid it when they argue a non-touchdown call, pushed the Bills back, and they lost their best player, being ejected. And they had to settle for a field goal and trail by a touchdown with 1:47 to play. However, they recovered the onside kick, and with only seconds left to play, the Bills made it to the 5. They're going to try to send this thing into overtime, but Flutie fumbled, and the Dolphins win their first playoff game since 1994. 2 awesome QBs doing their thing, but Marino seems to be playing with a whole new confidence since that Monday Night Football victory, and it showed here. And get a load of this. Yes, Elway versus Marino. 3. The Broncos were favored in this game, but that Miami upset was still in a lot of people's minds for that Monday night game. The Elway-Marino debate took center stage in the media again, like it is in this video. Favoritism was towards Marino since he had yet to win a championship, but the Elway boosters still factored in his Super Bowl win and how the Broncos were just an incredible team. Either way, each man had something to prove in this one. The setting this time, however, was Mile High Stadium. And if the ratings for that Monday night game were any sign, a lot of eyes would be on this one to boot, and they were. But Terrell Davis was the one doing the damage early on. He scored a 1-yard touchdown to open the scoring and then a 20-yard run to give them a 14-0 lead after the first quarter. Miami's running game, surprise, surprise, was non-existent. As good as Abdul-Jabbar was, he just didn't come to play on certain nights. As star linebacker Bronco Bill Romanowski made Miami's running game also a living hell. The Dolphins finally got on the board with a field goal, but the Broncos took a 21-3 lead after an 11-yard touchdown run by Derek LaVille. That's how it would stay at halftime. The Broncos extended their lead 24-3 and the Dolphins had no response. Marino was trying, but the Broncos defense had their number. Elway added salt to the wound, throwing a 28-yard touchdown pass to Rod Smith. Oh, wait, that's not it. A fumble recovered by Neil Smith was returned 79 yards, 38-3. The Broncos are back in the AFC Championship. And yes, you can see Marino's stats are better, as again, Terrell Davis was a beast running for nearly 200 yards. But again, Elway did what mattered most here, and it led his team to victory, and beats Marino when it matters the most. Facing the Broncos in the AFC Championship was a whole new New York Jets team after being a laughingstock for the majority of the 1990s. The great Bill Parcells was hired as their coach, and they had a new star quarterback, Vinny Testaverde, who had been stuck in terrible teams most of his career, but still performed very well for the most part. They had a sensational wide receiver in Keyshawn Johnson. On the defensive side, Pro Bowlers linebacker Mo Lewis and cornerback Aaron Glenn, who sadly was injured. And hey, let's throw in Curtis Martin, the star running back formerly of the Patriots, as Parcells knew how to utilize him very well. But be that as it may, however, the game was very defensive for the first 2 quarters. Testaverde was making some good passes, but also throwing some really bad ones. Curtis Martin looked like the high school loser in 80s movies, tripping as he left the starting blocks in a race. He just wasn't getting anything going. Meanwhile, Terrell Davis was making some good runs. Elway was making bad passes, however. It was an ugly game, but with 6 seconds to play in the half, the Jets garner a field goal. Early in the second quarter, Curtis Martin does score a 1-yard touchdown after a great drive from the Jets offense. 10-0 they lead. However, Elway goes back to work. McCaffrey catches a 47-yard pass that puts the Broncos at the 17, which would later set up Elway's pass to Griffith from 11 yards out. It's 10-7. The Jets still lead. A turnover on the ensuing kickoff allowed the Broncos to tie at 10-10 with a field goal. And then their next position, a big run from Davis, sets up another field goal. The Broncos had the lead. And a big punt return set up a huge 31-yard run from Davis. The Broncos lead 20-10 after 3. Elam adds a field goal and the Jets have nothing. The Broncos are going back to the Super Bowl. And for Elway, this will be his 5th trip to the big game, which would give him an NFL record at the time that he previously shared with Terry Bradshaw, Joe Montana, and Jim Kelly, starting in now his 5th Super Bowl. The Broncos' trip to the big game may not have been as dramatic or as thrilling as the year prior, but either way, this Denver Broncos team was truly something to behold with the talent they possessed, and the fact that their 38-year-old QB was still one of the best in the league. In this time, along with Elway, we of course know Marino is still here, and still playing well. And even Warren Moon still had something left in him well into his 40s. He was still kicking around. Randall Cunningham just had a huge comeback here with the Vikings. Doug Flutie turned Buffalo on its ear. Steve Young was playing superbly at this point. Troy Aikman, of course, of the Cowboys. Vinny Testaverde, of course, of the Jets, as we just mentioned. Then you had the new generation led by Brett Favre at the top of his game. Drew Bledsoe is still among the elite. Mark Brunell of the Jags. And the man ready to lead football into the new millennium, Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. Just kidding, just threw him in there to make sure you're paying attention. But yes, but Elway once again stands in the spotlight of the big dance. And awaiting them, the Atlanta Falcons. Talk about a team that turned the football world on its ear. They went from zeros to heroes almost overnight. A team of tremendous talent brought together by, oh yes, Dan Reeves. Yes, the man who guided the Broncos to 3 AFC championships in the 1980s. Yes, oh, indeed, he was the leader of the Dirty Birds. No, yeah, that very popular dance. God, I hated that thing. Maybe it's just because I'm still bitter that the Vikings didn't go to the Super Bowl and we might have had a better game, but we'll get to that. But make no mistake about it, Jamal Anderson was on a whole other level at running back, and you couldn't help but love that man. And hey, I love a good success story, and quarterback Chris Chandler was indeed that. After years of waiting in the wings, being kicked around, was at last a Pro Bowler after being with many mediocre teams and not getting a fair chance at sometimes. And that defense, oh my goodness. Jesse Tuggle at linebacker, Ray Buchanan at corner, and the awesome Eugene Robinson at safety, playing in his third straight Super Bowl after playing in the last 2 with the Packers. This team, like the Broncos, were 14-2. So it's Elway, the man who has always been among the best and fought his way to the top, facing off against Chris Chandler. Again, a good success story, tossed around from bad team to bad team, and makes the most of his biggest chance to shine with a team at least he can now finally work with. The stage is set. January 31st, 1999, where many Dolphin fans in Miami, Florida have to watch the very man they hate for simply being the thing their guy isn't, a championship, playing in the big game. Can Elway enhance his legacy even further, or will a new burrito champion emerge? In the beginning, Atlanta looked sharp. Jamal Anderson was incredible, running for 31 yards on the opening drive alone, and a costly pass interference call on Atwater also helped Atlanta move. However, after a huge sack from Romanowski, the Falcons had to settle for a field goal. But John responds. Beginning at their own 20, Elway again focuses, and on this drive would hit Ross Smith with a huge 41-yard pass, and Sharp caught 2 big passes as well. This would set up Griffith's 1-yard touchdown run for a touch, and eventually the Denver led 7-3. And get some bad news. Shannon Sharp is injured. He tries to keep playing, but soon leaves the game. Oh, this Atlanta can take advantage right here. Late in the first quarter, however, Elway throws a pick to Ronnie Bradford. It's already happening. He returns it to the Denver 35. The Broncos still escaped the first quarter, leading 7-3. The Broncos defense, however, came through, stopping Anderson on a 3rd and 1 attempt, and then again on a 4th down gamble. The Broncos ate up some decent time off the clock with an 11-play drive as Elway and Smith kept clicking, and Davis, of course, made some big runs, set up a field goal. It's 10-3 Broncos, up by a touchdown. Falcons drove again, but the great Morton Anderson missed a field goal. Not often you'd say that throughout his career. Then the Broncos did some more damage in a very famous play. Elway bombs it from his own 20 to Smith. He could go all the way. Touchdown, 80 yards, Elway to Smith. Gotta love it. 17-3 Broncos. The Falcons did get a field goal back late in the quarter, but the Broncos still had a 17-6 lead at the half. The Broncos looked great in the third quarter as John commanded a big drive, but Elam missed a field goal. Then it looks like the Falcons have light, but Darius Johnson intercepts the ball, and the Broncos go for another field goal. Elam misses it. Yeah. Atlanta is driving again, but Darian Gordon returns it all the way to the 24, and the Broncos start driving. The third quarter ends still 17-6 Broncos. Eventually, Griffith scored on a 1-yard touchdown run. It's 24-6 Broncos. But then Gordon intercepted another pass. Our boy runs it in from 3 yards out. 31-6 Broncos. Yeah, this game is pretty much out of reach. But Tim Dwight makes things a little interesting, returning the ensuing kickoff 94 yards to cut the lead to 31-13. The Broncos would add a field goal, 34-13. The Falcons finally engineer a successful drive, ending with Terrence Mathis for a touchdown and no 2-point convert. The Broncos win the Super Bowl again! And this year's MVP... Oh yes, John has accomplished just one more thing in his career he had yet to do, as he already won the big game, but now he's won it twice and was the MVP as a result. Was the game a classic? No, not at all, really. But Elway's performance was certainly something to behold, as he took command of this game and didn't let up whatsoever. Way to go, John. And to think, after that loss to Jacksonville a couple of years ago, Elway was in tears, not knowing if it would ever happen. Now it has happened twice. For our friend Dan, it's another heartbreaking end to a promising year. He again finished in the top 5 for completions, but despite his confidence and heart late in the season, he fell short of the Holy Grail once again. As for John, statistically it wasn't his strongest season, as injuries caused him to miss significant time, but when healthy he was still able to win and win big. A second Super Bowl ring and an MVP to go with it. And hey, look at that, his 9th career Pro Bowl, and he's 5th in passer ratings with his career high to boot. John proved to the world once again, he's truly a winner. And again, this year, the final year of the head-to-head battle, we have to give it to John. Well, between these two, they're both finishing their 16th season. Well, here's the final tabulation. Marino has 8, Elway has 7, and we've had one tie. Yes, very close indeed, but it looked like Marino had the better individual seasons overall. Well, more analysis to come. But things aren't quite done. In early of May 1999, the news finally came that we had anticipated. After 16 seasons, John Elway would retire from the game of football. Speculation surrounded Marino, but he wasn't quite done. He was determined that he too would have his happy ending. The Dolphins looked really good heading into 1999, but were they good enough? Well, with the Broncos losing Elway and a few other key players such as Steve Atwater, their success was about to come to an end. The Dolphins, oddly enough, opened the season against the Denver Broncos, as the Brian Griese era was about to begin. And despite the team's losses, they were still two-time defending Super Bowl champions. We need to keep that in mind. But the Dolphins had their way on this Monday night game, as Marino threw just 8 incompletions and 2 touchdowns in a 38-21 win. They would then go on to face the Cardinals. Dan would play pretty well in a 1916 win, but then lost 23-18 to Flutie and the Bills. Then it was Marino versus Manning 3, and both QBs put on a hell of a show. But it was Dan who came out on top in the thrill ride of the game. The Dolphins were down 31-27, and with 27 seconds to play, Marino in the clutch from 2 yards out found Orande Gradson, and the Dolphins won 34-31, and moved to 3-1 on the season. But very early in a game against the New England Patriots, Marino was injured, and in came Damon Huard, who played a beauty of a game in a thrilling 31-30 win. Marino was going to miss some time, and Huard filled in quite nicely, helping the team to a 16-13 win over the Eagles, 16-9 win over the Raiders, and the Miami defense was doing more damage, and a 17-0 win over the mighty Tennessee Titans. Their hot streak would end with a 23-3 loss to the Bills. But then they moved to 8-2 with a 27-17 win over the Patriots, and held first place but barely, as the Colts had the same record. It looked like Marino's dream could come true, and he was ready to come back. And played horrendously against the Cowboys, throwing 5 picks and 21 incompletions. The Dolphins were dominated 20-0. In Miami, the final showdown between Manning and Marino took place, and Manning got his first and only win over the legendary QB. And then Marino followed that up with a bad performance in a 28-20 loss to the Jets. 3 straight losses and 2 really bad games. Now, Marino's longevity was being questioned, along with his injury issues to boot. Marino played much better, however, in a 12-9 win over San Diego, breaking a losing streak. Seems to be the story with Jimmy Johnson's Dolphins. Start hot, cool down, and slip into the playoffs. Marino played pretty good, but threw 3 bad picks again against the New York Jets, and they lose 38-31. The Dolphins lost their final regular season game as Marino and Huard split the duties in a brutal 21-10 loss to the Redskins, but the Dolphins slipped into one of the last wildcard spots with a 9-7 record. Marino's return was not very good. The team went 1-5 after he came back, and his numbers were not Marino-like. His 1,360 yards weren't bad, but while completing nearly 53.1% of his passes isn't terrible either, this is way below the norm for Marino even in this era. He had 6 touchdown passes with 12 interceptions. Yikes. Definitely not normal for Dan. And there were some headlines saying that Huard should get the chance for the better of the team, but Dan was still Miami's man, and Jimmy Johnson and the whole Miami gang wanted him to have his moment. But the playoffs were now a different story, as the Dolphins still had a chance, but the problem is Marino hasn't won a road playoff game in his career, as they head into Seattle to take on the Seahawks, now coached by Mike Holmgren. And they are making their first playoff appearance since 1988. They had a talented young QB in John Kitna and former 49ers Pro Bowler, 1,000-yard rusher Ricky Waters, and a superb offensive lineman and future Hall of Famer Walter Jones. But it was their defensive star Cortez Kennedy, linebacker Chad Brown, and punt returner Charlie Rogers making the headlines. But Dan stepped into this game cool, calm, and collected. Both teams had trouble moving the ball early on, but it was Seattle who struck first, as Kitna found Sean Dawkins from 9 yards out to put Seattle up 7-0. Murray gave the Dolphins a field goal, and they trailed 7-3 after 1. In the second quarter, Marino still had trouble moving the ball and couldn't capitalize on the big interception to get the ball back. but Miami's defense was punishing waters, but Seattle still got a field goal with under a minute to go in the half and led 10-3. In the third quarter, Marino finally went to work, completing 6 straight passes, the 6th a 1-yard touchdown strike to Gadsden, and the game was tied 10-10. But then Charlie Rogers returned the ensuing kickoff 85 yards to give Seattle their one touchdown lead back 17-10. The Dolphins, however, pulled close within a field goal in the third quarter. 17-13, Seattle led after 3. But in the fourth quarter, the Marino magic came to life. 11 plays, 85 yards, leading to a 2-run yard by J.J. Johnson, and the Dolphins have the lead with 4:48 left to play, 2017. Time ran out on Seattle. Marino's dream was still alive, and football fans everywhere, not just in Miami, were rallying behind him. Next up came the Jacksonville Jaguars. Since their big upset over Denver in 1996, the team has been a prominent playoff contender, and Marino was ready. This would no doubt be his last chance at the Super Bowl, and he needed to get past this exciting Jags club, but what followed was nothing short of heartbreaking and disastrous. In the first half, Marino threw 14 incompletions and 2 interceptions. The Dolphins trailed at halftime, 41-7. Marino's afternoon was done. Hubert didn't fare any better. The Dolphins lose 62-7 in the biggest loss of the Super Bowl era in playoff football. The biggest loss in margin in NFL history since 1940. Definitely not the storybook ending he was hoping for. Of course, due to injuries, his stats are not going to be stellar, and also that final stretch of games was not very good to him. For the first time in his career, he threw more picks than touchdowns. He had a career-low passer rating, career-low incompletion percentage. The very next day, Jimmy Johnson retired as head coach, and we would soon learn that Dan had an option year on his contract, which the Dolphins would not be exercising. Dan's days in Miami were finished. He had an offer, however, from the Minnesota Vikings, whereas even at pushing 40 years old, people felt Dan still had value. How wild would it have been to see Marino and Moss work together? But Dan declined. Dan was given an offer to stay in Florida, playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a very promising team who had an 11-5 season in 1999 and an NFC Championship appearance. He declined. And finally, there was an offer from his hometown team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. How great would that be, finishing his career in your hometown, wear the uniform of the team he grew up watching? Hall of Famer Terry Bradshaw wearing that same uniform? He declined. Dan Marino decided to retire before the 2000 season. John Elway was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio in 2004. Dan Marino was inducted a year later in 2005, both on their first year of eligibility, as if that's any surprise. So now let's do some comparisons. In terms of head-to-head battle in individual seasons, we recap that Marino was 8-7-1 with a slight advantage. It's as close as you can get, really. Simple, Marino was always great from the get-go. Most of his best years were early on, but was still very good later on. Most of Elway's were later, as he was developing his game slower due to the team he was on. In terms of pure passing stats, Marino definitely wins. In passing yards, Marino was first all-time when he retired. But since the 21st century of the NFL has changed drastically at QB, he now ranks 7th, still very impressive with his 61,361 yards, while Elway still ranks high at 11 with 51,475. Marino still ranks 8th in all-time completions with nearly 5,000. Elway ranks 12th with 4,123. Marino's 59.4% percentage in completion, well, now ranks pretty low at 69th all-time as of this video, whereas Elway's is tied for 56.9% tied for 108th. Marino's 420 touchdown passes still ranks 7th of all time, while Elway's 300 is ranked 13th as of this video. Marino also even leads Elway by a slight margin of throwing 252 picks to Elway's 226. They are ranked 8th and 17th as of this video respectively. Marino's 86.5 passer rating of this video is 41st of all time. Elway's 79.9 is 87th. Now let's look at individual awards. They each won MVP once, but Marino won Offensive Player of the Year as well, something Elway did not accomplish. In terms of Pro Bowls, each have 9 selections. Marino was a first-team All-Pro 3 times. Elway did not accomplish that at all in his career. Also, Marino was a second-team All-Pro 3 times, and so was Elway. Both had won the NFL's Man of the Year award, and to top it off, both men are in the Hall of Fame. Both men are selected to the NFL's all-time 100th anniversary team, and both have had their jerseys retired by their respective teams. Marino edges out barely on this one. Been a first-team All-Pro 3 times and winning that Offensive Player of the Year, but it's close to dead even here once again. Back to regular season stats. How often did they lead the league in these categories? Well, Marino led in passing yards 5 times, Elway only once. Marino led in completion 6 times, Elway just once. Neither man actually led the league in completion percentage at any time in their career, which is quite surprising. Marino led the league in touchdown passes 3 times, Elway never did. The dubious interception category, however, only Marino ever led in that category, but it was only once. In passer rating, Marino only led the league once, but that's still one more than Elway. But now let's look deeper. As a starter, and again, we're just looking at a regular season right now. Marino started 240 games in his career and has a record of 147-93. Very impressive. Elway started 231 games in his career, has one more win than Marino at 148-82-1, and has better winning percentage. Here's one I wanted to calculate for a while. Wins over fellow Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Again, we're talking regular season here. Marino had 40 games against fellow Hall of Famers, has more wins and games than Elway in that regard, but has also gone 17-23, mainly due to his many misfortunes against Jim Kelly. But something to note that it had, he'd gone all the way from beating a latter-day Ken Stabler to a rookie prospect named Peyton Manning. Elway, however, had success over numerous division rivals and even had a really good track record against Warren Moon. But we were almost dead even in comebacks. Marino had slightly more with 33, getting some in his final season. Elway had 31. Elway, however, had a bit more of a flair for the dramatic when it came to his, and more is best known in playoff comebacks as well. Now, yes, I know you're going to get on my case for praising Elway more. Sue me. But I will say both men came up in the clutch, definitely, in the regular season. And versus each other, well, Marino took both regular season meetings. Now that I mentioned Hall of Fame QBs, let's look at how these men fared against rivals who aren't Hall of Famers but were still excellent quarterbacks in their time. Marino had many matchups with Ken O'Brien of the New York Jets, also from the class of 1983, and definitely is probably the fourth, I'd say, behind Elway, Marino, and Kelly. No shame in that. He was a 2-time Pro Bowl quarterback and the NFL's passing rating leader in 1985. And the two had quite the rivalry, and they were dead even at 7-7 in the 14 games they faced each other. At the tail end of Marino's career, he had some tremendous showdowns with Drew Bledsoe of the Patriots, a 4-time Pro Bowl QB and former first overall pick. Once again dead even, this time 5-5. Elway had one of the most underrated quarterback rivalries of all time with David Craig of the Seattle Seahawks. Craig stayed a division rival of Elway's even when he went to Kansas City, and even they faced off a couple more times during the former 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback's time with the Arizona Cardinals in Chicago, which were both short-lived. 20 times they went head-to-head, and John went 11-9 against his rival. The playoff rivalry between the Browns and the Broncos is well documented, but Elway and Kosar had 5 regular season outings against each other. John Elway edged him out, 3 wins over 2 losses. And Elway seemed to have the number against the 4-time Pro Bowl quarterback and 1988 NFL MVP Boomer Esiason, going 3-1 against him. And now we venture into the playoffs. Both men have 10 appearances. Marino has missed the postseason 7 times. Elway has missed it 6. Elway has taken 7 regular season division titles compared to Marino's 5. Oh, who are we kidding? Elway clearly wins this one. Marino's 8-10 in the playoffs. Elway is 14-8. He was unable to beat Hall of Fame quarterbacks, losing to Jim Kelly almost every time they faced in the postseason. But, well, at the same time, though, his one win is over Joe Montana. Elway is 4-2 in the playoffs against Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Only 1 big game appearance from Big Dan, and 5 from Elway. And most important, Elway has those 2 Super Bowls. And now the thing I said that held these two back for so long. For Denver, it was a poor offensive line. For Marino and Miami, it was not a strong enough running game ever being developed, which was needed in this era no matter how good a quarterback was. Miami was dead in the water, with just one 1,000-yard rushing season. That was from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, while Denver had 3 players run for 1,000 yards a combined 7 times. The only Pro Bowl Miami backfielder was fullback Keith Byers. Byers was a big man who was great at blocking and had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage in his Pro Bowl season. That season, oddly enough, where Marino missed 11 games and was gone for the whole season in 1993, so it really didn't matter at the end of the day. Well, the offensive line for Miami, however, was always strong, not to mention they had some Pro Bowl tight ends, but the O-line alone had 6 different players with a combined 13 selections for the Dolphins. For Denver, they had 5 players and 8 selections, which seems still really good, but all but one of those came after 1995. Gary Zimmerman had been added to the team and changed the offensive line. They also had the great Shannon Sharp at tight end, however. Elway to this day is the 4th most sacked quarterback in NFL history. And lastly, how many Pro Bowl receivers did these two greats have in their careers? For Denver, it had always been kind of inconsistent. Marino, on the other hand, had 5 different receivers make the Pro Bowl, combined 10 appearances. Elway, just 2 for 7 selections. 6 of them belonged to Shannon Sharp, the others to Ed McCaffrey. Denver had a lot of elements to be the contenders they were for many years, as they brought all of these together in time for the last 2 seasons of Elway's career, but that non-running game killed Miami in many ways. Clearly, statistically, Marino wins in awards. Marino has an edge, but Elway wasn't exactly dominated in that department either. When it comes to winning games, Elway has a very slight edge that way too, and always seen it fair, I guess you could say, against elite quarterbacks. Playoffs belong to Elway, no doubt. Is there really a winner here? Marino made fans' jaws drop. Elway made jaws drop the way he found ways to win. Both are great for different reasons, but at the end of the day, any fan who grew up in this era, from the 1983 draft, the year I was born no less, to watch them to the end of their careers was a hell of a treat. And well, the accolades speak for themselves. What other NFL-related content would you like to see me cover? Leave a suggestion below. In the meantime, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya.